Escalating tensions at the Russia-Ukraine border. The European Union has reaffirmed its support for Kiev and has warned of new sanctions on Moscow should the situation worsen. Some 100,000 Russian troops are now stationed along the country's border with Ukraine, but the Kremlin insists its troops pose no threat.
A fist bump and a joint news conference. Germany's Olaf Scholz and France's Emmanuel Macron in a show of unity after the EU leaders' meeting. A debut for the new German Chancellor. It was an important and good experience. I felt at ease. But even if Olaf Scholz had a good start, challenges were looming large over the meeting. Especially what Russia might be planning worries many EU leaders. Thousands of Russian troops are still amassed at the border with Ukraine, prompting some to paint a gloomy picture.
Probably we face most dangerous situation in last 30 years.
EU leaders threatened massive consequences should Russia invade Ukraine, even as they left the door open for talks with Moscow. We should not be naive, but also not refrain from dialogue. We have to find the only path that can prevail in this region and in this relationship, the path of discussion and political solutions. Outside the venue, another threat is looming. There was hope the pandemic would be history. With the Omicron variant, however, the situation has changed dramatically.
It is spreading at a ferocious pace and potentially has the risk of escaping our vaccines, at least partially. We know that our healthcare systems are overstretched right now, and this is partly linked to the large number of unvaccinated patients.
EU leaders said a common approach is vital to fight the surge of infections. But some countries have already made their own decisions. Italy and others want all travelers to present a PCR test when entering the country, and that includes the vaccinated.
For more, let's speak to DW Brussels correspondent Jack Perrick. Jack, EU leaders, we've been hearing from them about potential economic sanctions on Russia should the military invade Ukraine. Are you getting any specifics on what those sanctions could potentially look like?
Not really, to be honest with you, Abby. It's foggy, the details of that, as it is here in Brussels this morning. Essentially, we know that there have been some pretty intense discussions among EU leaders during this summit about exactly what the sanctions could entail. I've spoken to a number of analysts over the last few weeks since this massive troop buildup on the Ukrainian border of Russian troops, and they simply suggest that now is the time that the European Union is having to decide how much pain it's willing to inflict on itself in order to inflict pain on Moscow and potentially change the decisions of the Kremlin. Now, the Kremlin wants assurances from Western powers that countries like Ukraine and Georgia would never become NATO members, the members of the military alliance that the Kremlin believes is sort of antagonistic towards itself. Now, as far as these sanctions go, ever since the annexation of Crimea and the outbreak of violence in eastern Ukraine in 2014-2015, there have been a number of listed names of senior Russian officials who are on sort of travel bans and asset freezes, meaning they can't access European banks, etc. But the reality is, unless more senior elite figures and friends of Vladimir Putin, that probably those kind of sanctions now wouldn't have too much of an effect. And the question is, how far could they go? Could they potentially prevent Russian banks who are heavily reliant on the SWIFT payment system for international payments? Could they prevent those banks from accessing that? And would that have a serious enough effect on the Russian economy to change the way Vladimir Putin is thinking about this situation on the border with Ukraine?
Jack, another major issue plaguing EU leaders right now is, of course, the coronavirus pandemic. Is any work being done right now to coordinate efforts in terms of restrictions, including travel restrictions?
Well, they really wanted to do that, Abby. They wanted to get some new clarity. And in the document that we've had after this summit, they have said that they will continue to work together. But as we heard in the report, countries like Italy say that they simply insist on demanding that a PCR test is necessary for entry. They want to make sure that they're trying to stop the spread of the disease. And the Italian Prime Minister, Mario Draghi, is said to have defended that position quite strongly in the European Council. Portugal and Ireland are also having similar measures. And I think as the spread of the Omicron variant continues, there are real worries about what could happen. The ECDC, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, is suggesting already that European countries should start considering makeshift hospitals and expanding their capacity over fears that this Omicron variant could really overwhelm healthcare systems in the coming weeks.
Jack, briefly, if you can, how is the new Chancellor, the new German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, being received at his first EU summit there?
Well, it was interesting, Abby. He had a press conference with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron at the end of the summit, trying to show sort of all smiles. They had a little fist bump as well, but that didn't sort of prevent questions about the two. France and Germany are on two very different sides on an issue that was on the table as well, which is whether nuclear energy should be considered green. France is heavily reliant on nuclear energy, and Germany is phasing it out. And actually, the leaders couldn't come to any kind of decision that could get into the document to be published after the summit, Abby.
DW Brussels correspondent Jack Perrick. Thanks, Jack.